Want to first say so sorry for the technical difficulties, but we are here now and it's so exciting. Happy Trans Day of Visibility. My name is Dubs Weinblatt. My pronouns are they, them, theirs, and I'm an Associate Director of Education and Training here at Keshet. I'm a genderqueer trans Jew, and I'm so thrilled that we're able to convene and share in this special day together. A quick note, this meeting is being recorded, so if you'd like to remain anonymous, please make sure you turn off your camera and remove your name from the window. And please make sure you're keeping yourself muted. So amidst all this chaos, I keep trying to find the silver linings. And one that keeps popping out to me is that because we're all participating in everything virtually, we're pushed to adjust our regularly scheduled programs. And now because of this, we've actually been able to assemble a group of panelists and folks who are watching the panel in a way that we wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. So I think that that's really special. So Trans Day of Visibility is a day each year dedicated to celebrating transgender people and raising awareness of discrimination faced by transgender people worldwide, as well as celebrating our contributions to society. For today's conversation, we will get to know some of the Keshet Mishpacha, our family. We'll share our experiences, the importance of visibility and joy, and our hopes for the future. A note about our panel. Our gender identities and experiences are influenced by our assigned sex at birth, race, socioeconomic status, and other personal identities. One panel cannot represent the full breadth of trans experiences and cannot claim to speak for all trans people. We all talk about our experiences in different ways and use different terms to affirm who we are. This is a panel of some Keshet staff and board members who are excited to share their experiences and reflections on gender and transness. We encourage you to actively seek out the voices and experiences of trans and non-binary identities who aren't represented on our specific panel. Again, please make sure you are muted at all times. If you have any questions or concerns about tech, please chat our Keshet staff member, Zora Berman. Zora, give a little wave, and she'll be able to help you. And if you have questions for the panelists, please also put them in the chat, and we'll take some time at the end to answer them. Okay, so now on to the good stuff. I'm going to give each of our panelists just a minute now to introduce themselves, and I will do this in alphabetical order. So first up, we have Keshet's Director of Education and Training, Rabbi Micah Buck-Yael.
Hi all, I am Rabbi Micah Buck-Yael. My pronouns are he, him, and I am Keshet's Director of Education and Training. And Deb, you asked that each of us share some of the identities that feel really central to us. So I think not necessarily in order of importance, but identities that I hold really close are identity as a queer person, a transgender man, although I believe that gender in general and my gender in particular is more complex than that. That seems like the community and label that matches most closely. I'm Jewish, I'm a conservative rabbi, I'm an educator, I'm a parent, and another really important piece of identity is that I'm a cook and a baker as a hobby, and that is the place that you are most likely to find me when I am not educating and working out in the world.
Thank you, Micah. Up next, we have Keshet board member, Dr. Joy Layden. You are muted.
Hi. My name is Joy. My pronouns are she, her. I'm the reason we were late. I was having trouble becoming visible on this Trans Day of Visibility. I'm sorry about that. I think everybody that I've ever talked with has a sense of themselves that's more complex than the categories that our cultures give us to describe ourselves. But in addition to identifying as trans, I identify as a parent and a teacher and a writer, and I'm very proud to be part of Keshet.
Thank you, and thanks for your humor in this stressful time for technology. Okay, up next we have Keshet's Development and Communications Project Manager, River McMicken.
Hello, everyone. I'm River. My pronouns are they, them, theirs. I think when it comes to identity, it's really important that we're not thinking of ourselves as one thing all the time. That said, I tend to think of myself as non-binary, transmasculine-ish. Kind of depends on the day you catch me sometimes. But more than that, like, I'm an artist, I'm a graphic designer, I'm an introvert for the most part, and I'm also a cat person. I'm also a Rhode Islander, which seems like a weird identity, but if you've ever met anyone who grew up in Rhode Island, like, that's a pretty strong part of our identity, I think.
Thank you. Up next, we have Keshet's Executive Assistant and Advocacy Associate, Kaden Mohammed.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kaden Mohammed. I use he, him, his pronouns. I am, as Dub said, the Executive Assistant and Advocacy Associate at Keshet. This is a little bit bittersweet for me because this is actually my last couple of days at Keshet, so I'm really excited to be here and being able to be with everybody. I identify as being a trans man. I identify as a person of color. My trans identity has always sort of been wrapped up in gender in general. I went to a women's college and graduated from there and started my transition while I was on campus at a women's college. So that's always been a part of my story. And I'm excited to tell you guys more about that.
Thanks, Kaden. And last but not least, Keshet's Chicago Education and Training Manager, Essie Shahar Hill.
Hi, y'all. My name is Essie. My pronouns are they, them, and theirs. I'm based here in Chicago, as Dub said. I am a white, able-bodied, queer, trans Jew. I'm a social worker. I'm a baker. I'm a learner. And I've been on Keshet's education and training team for about 2 years now.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. So why don't we just dive into our first question, which is, how do you define visibility and how does it impact your work with Keshet?
All right, I have some thoughts on this one, so I'll just jump in.
Great.
I tend to think of, there's the idea of what does it mean to be visible, first of all, which for me can be something as simple as like not hiding my transition, not hiding my history, or something more demonstrative, carrying a trans flag or saying it out loud. And those are all very visible acts. But for me, visibility isn't really about me. Like, I don't personally feel a need to be out and trans myself, except that I want other people to see it. I think for me, growing up, I didn't realize being trans was like an option. I didn't have models. There was no one in my sphere, my social circle. There was no one on TV that modeled the wide variety of gender identities that are available. So for me to be visible, it's a way to show other people that there are multiple ways to be, multiple genders, and basically that there are other options. You can make a choice.
Thank you. Yeah, it's like setting that roadmap for folks is really important. I have a very similar experience to that. Any other panelists want to jump in about what being visible means to you and how that affects your work at Keshet?
Yeah, I can jump in. I agree with River on being an example or a role model or showing options for folks who are maybe similar to us. I also think there's an aspect of being visible for folks who are very different from us. So I think about my role as the Chicago Education and Training Manager. I'm going into Jewish organizations and doing lots of trainings and educational programs and things around being LGBTQ inclusive. And I think for a lot of people in those rooms, I'm like the first trans person they've ever met. And so it takes things from the hypothetical to the real and the tangible. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's a real trans person in the front of the room and they're telling me their needs. And so this is no longer on paper. This is now like flesh and blood. Like I can put a face to this idea. So that's a big part of visibility for me is telling people, you do know a trans person, now you've met at least one, and we're real and we're here and we're visible.
Thanks, Essie. Anyone else want to jump in?
I agree with both what River and Essie said. I think I probably ended up at Keshet just because of coming out teaching at an Orthodox Jewish institution. So I am the other person for a living also, the way Essie is, even though the Yeshiva University wasn't really looking for an out trans person. I did not ever want to be standing out as different. And I thought of gender transition, in fact, as a way of my differentness disappearing into a kind of wholeness. And it took me a while to realize that that wasn't going to happen. So in addition to feeling that there's kind of an obligation to show people that this is a way that you can be, help people who are not aware of it or are struggling to see if that's a possibility for being human, and being out there as the real live trans person, the sort of unicorn that you can listen to and see as a human being. In addition to that, for me, I realized that if I wasn't including my transness in who I am, then I'm leaving out important parts of my life and my life story. That was not what I thought was going to happen. But it turns out that to be a whole person, I have to be visible as a trans person.
Thank you, Joy. And Kaden, I think you were gonna say something.
I was, yeah. I totally agree with what everybody else has said and really appreciate those responses. I think for me, when I was thinking about this question, I was sort of thinking about it as both like, how do I think about visibility explicitly and implicitly? And so thinking about it explicitly, like I think everything that everybody just said, right? Like, are there actually trans people that you can talk to and have a relationship with and have a better understanding of what trans identities are and the sort of the spectrum of different trans identities, et cetera. But I also think it's sort of in the implicit. And I think that that's a lot of the work that Keshet actually does, right? Is thinking about like, does your organization or does your school or does your synagogue or whatever other institution or organization, you know, are you using gender neutral language in your communications and marketing? Do you have forums that are gender inclusive? Do you have gender inclusive spaces like gender neutral or single use bathrooms? And so I think I was thinking about it on sort of both of those different levels because I think they're both important and they sort of go hand in hand.
Thanks, Kaden. Yeah, please.
And I think I would jump off of that, Kaden. I'm really glad that you named that. That as we think about visibility implicitly, also there is everything that happens, you know, for each one of us as an individual, getting to be our whole selves, visible in the world, modeling possibilities for everyone around us. But there's also this piece of visibility that happens as a community and as an organization. I think something that's really amazing about this group of humans that we've assembled today is that the reason that we are this panel is that we are a subset of people working and exercising board leadership in the same organization, and that we, the fact that we have visibility and representation in an organizational sense, not just as one person, not just as one individual in one role specific to quote unquote trans issues, but that we are throughout the organization addressing our work with a number of different strengths and areas of expertise to offer. That's part of what it means to have visibility in a community, I think.
Definitely. Yeah. Thank you, Micah. So now I would love, we've been talking a lot about like institutional change and the work that we're doing as Keshet, as a whole. So I'd love to hear about a time when you felt embraced by your community as your full self. Like, what did that look like within an institution of being able to show up as your full self? Not all at once.
I think that is, that silence speaks volumes, that it was not like, oh, can I limit myself to the top 10 occasions when I showed up as my full self? But I just want to also say that it is normal for people to only be part of ourselves at a time. Mostly, I don't think people, I mean, when I'm on the subway or when I'm in the classroom, I don't want my students' whole selves. I want the parts of them that fit in with the role of student. You know, the parts that don't really fit in with the role of student, they can be problematic. And I know that they want that from me also. So I think that it's pretty special to be able to create communities that give people those experiences of being there as their whole self. I don't think it's like a daily thing. I think it takes a special effort and concentration from a community, and also a special bravery and vulnerability on the part of a person to be there. For me, the only example that jumps to mind is when I got married at my, after we were married, we went to my wife's synagogue and we had an aliyah and they were dancing around us. And I had never had an experience like that. And I kept thinking, you know, it wasn't my community exactly, but I realized, you know, by golly, they know all about us and how queer we are. And they're basically a straight congregation. And they're putting us right at the center and circling us. And they are holding all of us in our inability to fit into any of the predetermined Jewish categories. That really stood out for me.
That's really special. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for also naming that silence in the beginning. I made a joke because I make jokes and I'm uncomfortable sometimes, but I appreciate you naming that. That's very real. Anyone else have a moment they'd like to share?
I do have one. I mean, it's telling, right, that I have one. And I come from a relatively supportive family and relatively supportive friends, and a lot of people around me are trying their hardest and have been trying their hardest to support me. And this relates to my work with Keshet, which is that I was working at Keshet when I went through the entire process of changing my name, which, if anyone's unfamiliar, it can be very complicated. In my case, it was exceptionally complicated, mostly because I had a marriage license in another state and they had different name change regulations, whatever. It was a pain. And yet when I brought it up at work, when I brought it up with the people I worked with, it wasn't even a thing. There was, I was never made to feel like it was an inconvenience for anyone, either logistically in terms of updating my paperwork or HR stuff. No one hesitated to call me by my new name. Everyone was very incredibly supportive. And while I was navigating the process of telling people that I was making this change, making it really formal, getting paperwork swapped over, getting new credit cards, getting new documentation, it was really incredible to come to work and have one place where everyone knew, everyone was totally fine with it. It wasn't a big deal, and I didn't even have to worry about explaining it.
I relate to that a lot. Before I changed my name legally, I received a piece of mail that I needed, and two of our colleagues proactively crossed off my dead name, my legal name, and wrote in dubs in all of the places that it wouldn't like null the document. And just taking that extra step to make me feel seen and comfortable was like just so incredible and felt so great. Any other panelists want to share an experience? It's okay if not. One other experience that I,
and I think it's
sorry,
worth,
go ahead, Micah.
Yeah. No, please.
Okay, just real quick, I was gonna say, the first Shabbaton, Keshet Teen LGBTQ and Ally Teen Shabbaton that I went to as staff, I actually just cried the entire time because it was the first time that I truly was able to bring my Jewish self and my trans self into a space where both were held and celebrated in such a strong, cheerful, loving way. And even though I was supposed to be like the adult in the room, I just was like crying the whole time because it was so overwhelming and beautiful. And seeing a room full of 100 teens embracing folks of all different gender identities and different pronouns was also really inspirational to me. And from that weekend on, I changed my pronouns because I felt brave enough to do so. Micah.
Yeah, amazing. And mean, I think similarly, when I think of this particular experience, and I'm going to preface it by noting that actually in large parts of my life, I feel welcomed, loved, and known for who I am. And I want to name an experience from a moment in my life where bringing together Jewish and religious identity and queer and trans identity felt like it really happened for the first time. And I was at a Shabbaton, and it was a queer normative space, which at that point in my life was a very, very rare thing. And I used to spend a lot of my time in spaces where prayer involved a mechitza, a dividing line between men and women. And somebody saw me as I sort of stepped into the space and paused, because I didn't really know where I could stand to be comfortable, and I didn't really know what this thing was. I didn't really put a name to it for myself yet. And someone just came up to me and said, "It's okay, we can make a space for us." And then I was sobbing and didn't sleep for a week. But it was the most amazing moment, not necessarily of an organization or an institution knowing how to see people, but of individuals being able to say, "There's room for us." And also, I think, I'm not going to put a word on you, but you're one of us. Amazing moment.
Yeah, thanks, Micah. And that's a beautiful segue into my next question, which is, I'd love to explore how your trans identities and your spiritual or religious life do or do not feel interwoven with each other.
Okay, I'm happy to be the person who keeps going first, but I'm also happy to not be that person. So I just want to pause for a second and see if anybody else wants to dive in. Okay, for me, being Jewish and having a relationship with God and being trans has been life-sustaining as long as I can remember. So not being able to feel like I was fitting into the way gender was working in my family made me feel like I couldn't fit into my family at all, or really into humanity. I didn't know that it was possible to be human and not fit cleanly and perfectly into these two binary categories. And so I felt very, very alone and very disembodied and socially dislocated. And the only other person I knew who was like that was God. I think it's normal for kids to have, it's not universal, but I think it's normal for kids to have strong senses of the divine or spiritual experiences before they're socialized out of them, or before they're told that only some of them are valid. And because I was so alone, nobody ever told me that I was wrong, that God wouldn't hang out with someone like me. I thought it was the opposite. It felt like God and I were, we would fetch together about how people couldn't see us just because, little detail, we didn't have a body to make us visible. People are so petty that way. Just because you don't have a body, they can't see you. Just because you don't fit into their categories, they can't understand you. And just because they can't see or understand you, they don't know that you love them. And you can't really feel secure in your love for them. So that formative relationship has driven a lot of my work.
Joy, I think it's really, really interesting to hear that piece of your story. I feel like in so many ways, my experience around spirituality and transness is almost the opposite. I grew up sort of with synagogue and various religious traditions sort of peripheral in my life, but didn't really have a sense of direct personal spiritual connection until I was a young adult, and I found myself really wrestling with both queerness and transness and Jewishness at the same time, and in particular, seeing what the impact of Jewishness on the lives of people who were queer and trans was, and feeling like even as I figured myself out, I was learning things about community and leadership and ways that people sort of filter the message of what and who is God and what and who is spirit. And feeling like that process, as much as it could have pushed me away, pulled me in closer. Right? I've got to be figuring out this thing because it's clearly alive and powerful and deep. And these people can't be telling me something true about who I am in relation to that.
Essie, I think you were going to share.
Yes. I was going to say, I think this question is so interesting, especially how you said religious / spiritual life. For me, those feel like two very different things. So when I think of religious life, I'm thinking about Jewish communal life. And that feels hard as a trans person, as someone who's not, I don't feel very close to God. I don't know if I like believe in capital G God. And so for me to feel connected to a religious community or practice, I need to be able to like let everything else go and just totally focus on that. And I feel like as a trans person in Jewish communal life, I rarely can let everything else go. I'm worrying about my body or how people are reading me, or if I'm going to be misgendered when I turn to say Shabbat Shalom to the person next to me. And so that feels hard to connect spiritually that way. But in other ways that feel sort of separate from that religious communal life, I feel like my spirituality and my transness are really interrelated. And I'm thinking about these special moments that we have in our text. And like Keshet colleagues have heard me say this a bunch, but in a recent Beit Midrash, I was studying some Talmud, some queer Talmud, and there's this phrase, mitzvah lehitpalel im dumei chama, which translates to like, it's a mitzvah to pray with the reddening sun, but it's all about how dawn is the holiest time to pray because it's not day and it's not night and it's in between, and it's something we can't categorize and we can't fully wrap our heads around. And that felt so salient to me as like someone who feels that they don't fit into one of these two, night or day categories, right? Like man or woman. And it's just much more complex and much more beautiful in my mind than that. So those spiritual moments make me feel so much more connected to the earth and to the universe, which feels very different for me than religious life.
I just wanted to add a footnote to that, which is a couple of years ago, I was asked to speak to a congregation about Passover. And so I started thinking about transness and Passover, and I realized Passover is a holiday that forces all observant Jews to be driven crazy by identity-defining binaries that your life depends on. You know, one crumb of the wrong stuff and you're kicked out of the Jewish people, which is exactly the way I felt when I was growing up. You know, one little behavior that was hint of the wrong kind of gender, and I would be exiled forever. And when the rabbis were elaborating those into halakha, they responded by complicating all the binaries because they realized nobody could actually live within those binaries. It's very simple, like just don't leaven and unleaven. That should be really easy. But instead, they added all of these other categories and foods that are not leaven, but they're forbidden, you know, leaven that you have, but you don't possess officially. You know, there's all, you know, it's the dust of the earth, or you've sold it to somebody, but it's right there in the cupboards where it always was, but it's somehow there, but not there. So, you know, the laws of Passover force every Jew to deal with high stakes binary life. And the response is, yeah, nobody can hack this. We wouldn't have any Jews left. They'd all fail.
Thank you for that footnote. Any other panelists want to add? Great, let's move on then. So what is one thing you wish our cisgender allies knew?
I think for me personally, I'm only speaking for myself here. I wish that people understood like how hard and how exhausting it can be to navigate like all of what's going on around trans identity right now, like simultaneously what feels like this explosion of like conversation and discussion around trans identity and trans people in the media, but then also sort of like the attacks that have been happening on trans rights and non-binary people through different pieces of legislation, and like the hatred that has sort of come along with that from individuals as well. And it's just exhausting. Like it can be really exhausting to constantly have to deal with that. I think another part of it for me is that obviously my full-time job is at Keshet. Outside of Keshet, I also do work with another nonprofit, the Massachusetts Transgender Political Coalition. And so my professional life is very much related to being in LGBTQ and trans specific spaces, which is amazing and like fulfilling in a lot of different ways. And it's amazing to work with people who understand that. And it sort of adds to the exhaustion because every day I wake up and I'm a trans person that has to face this in the real world, and I have to face this at my job, and I have to face it in my volunteer work, and it can just be a lot. And I wish that cis people sort of understood how taxing that can be, because I think it might impact how they interact with trans folks and some of the things that they ask from us.
Aiden, thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm wondering if it'd be okay if I ask you a follow-up question. When you say you wanting cis people to be mindful of things that they're asking of us, can you maybe give an example or two of what you mean by that? Because people might not be aware of that they're even asking something of a trans person that maybe they shouldn't be doing.
Yeah, I'm thinking like I've gotten like random emails sometimes from people that are like, hey, can you like help me understand this thing, or help me like understand what this term means? And I understand that that's often coming from a place of wanting to educate themselves and like wanting to be better allies, which I deeply appreciate. And it's the type of thing that, like in both of those specific examples, like that's probably something that they could have Googled. And also it would have been nice if the initial ask of that was like, hey, I'm wondering if you have like the time or the space for me to ask you this thing that I'm wondering, instead of making the assumption that like it's my job to educate them on that topic or that question that they have. I don't know if that helps.
No, that's very helpful. Thank you. Does anyone else have examples that they can give? I know that I experience that a lot, Kaden, being a professional educator, and also outside of Keshet, I produce a queer improv storytelling show and host a podcast. And so people come to me a lot with those kinds of requests, and it's hard for me to sometimes find the line and set a boundary, because I want to help everyone, but also you're right, it's very taxing and exhausting to hold that emotional labor and for other people.
I think that connecting to that, I understand that when we get asked a lot of questions, it's because it looks complicated, right? We're complicated to cis people. Our journeys are complicated, both on a practical level and emotional level. We've talked a lot about not quite fitting into binaries, especially where transition might be concerned. And I think something I would really, if I had to choose one thing, because I have a fair list of things I would love cis allies to understand, but one thing is that as complicated as it is for them, it's more complicated for us. It is just as complicated for us to figure out who we are, what we're doing, what that means, what does it say about us, what does it say about our place in the world. So as they're trying to figure that out about us, we're often struggling with many of the same questions. And that falls into the emotional labor, the difficulty of honestly trying to figure out our own stuff, while also responding to the people we care about, who are asking from a place of love and of support, and they're trying really hard, and they're not trying to hurt us. And still, it can be very painful and very, very difficult for us.
I saw Joy and then Essie.
Oh, I'm sorry. Essie, do you want to go first?
You're good, go for it.
At first, I wasn't sure if I had any ask, but what I've been finding myself telling non-trans people is I've been asking them to reflect on the ways that they don't fit into categories either. I don't use the term cis or cisgender because everybody always pushes back on the idea that, what, you think I'm comfortable with ideas about masculinity? You think I'm comfortable, right? Like, nobody wants to say they fit into boxes. And at first I thought that was just, oh, you want to be special too, whatever. But I realized, no, that's because you're a messy human being. And all of these categories, they're tools for simplification. And so that means they cost all of us something to fit into them. And they're complicated for all of us to negotiate with them. And so what I've been trying to ask non-trans people to do is to access their experiences of the ways that and the times that they don't fit in, what I would call trans experiences, and so that they no longer see this as they're trying to understand me in ways that are totally separate from them. Instead, they're trying to do what I think is the more empowered human thing of saying, oh, how can I use what I know about being human to understand your situation of being human? Not that you're exactly the same, but also not starting from a place of assuming you're completely different and therefore you have to teach me everything in order for me to meet you where you are.
Yeah, thank you. Essie?
I just had a footnote to add to what River said. They were mentioning, how complicated it is for other people to understand us. It's more complicated for us. And I just wanted to add, the reason that it's complicated for us, or the reason that it's hard, is not actually an individual thing, right? Like, it's not that we are messed up or we're mentally ill, or like we're just really inherently complex. At least for myself, I'll say, like, my belief is that the reasons that trans people largely struggle and it's complicated for us is because of the systems we're in. It's because the world wasn't made for us. It's because we're getting kicked out of our homes. It's because we can't get the care we need. It's because people won't hire us, right? So I just wanted to add that, that it, in my view of the world, it's not based on like us being an anomaly, we as transgender people being an anomaly. It's because of the systems of oppression that we are all a part of.
Thank you for that belated footnote. And Joy, thank you for bringing up the notion of empathy. I think it's really important for us to keep that in our minds and our hearts as we keep navigating this world that we're living in right now. I have one last question for us, and then I'm going to transition us into our last segment, pun intended. Oh, Micah.
I just wanted to add very briefly that I think the thing that I wish that our cisgender allies knew, at least for me, is that with all of the ways in which the world can be complicated and navigating and educating and having unfair expectations or asks placed on us can be complicated, I still think that being trans is the best thing that could possibly have happened in my life and wouldn't change my identity and my story for anybody else's.
Thank you. I actually think that's a great last note. So I will now transition us, pun intended, into our last segment, which is basically me turning the program over to my colleague, Zora Berman, and she will ask us questions that we have received throughout the panel. If you think of more questions, feel free to chat them. And so now I will pass it over to Zora.
Hi, everyone. Like Deb said, my name is Zora Berman. My pronouns are she, her, hers. My role at Keshet is the Education Program Associate, and so excited to field some of these questions that we have to our panelists. So first up, Shoshana Hellman asked, wanted to know, what is better, respect or acceptance? And what comes first for you?
I think for me, again, speaking just for myself, I think that it's hard to have acceptance without respecting somebody first. So I think that respect would have to come first, right? Respecting that we all have the right to be who we are as like a fundamental, just like tenet of being a human being. And then I think the next step to that is really being able to accept somebody for who they are. And, you know, I think the difference between that might be like, you know, I respect your right to exist versus I want to help make your life better. Like, how could I be a better ally to you? So I think that for me, that's how I see it.
Thanks, Keaton. Does anyone else want to add to that or speak to their own experience?
I think, to me, as Kaden said, respect should be like baseline, like universal. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to put the right words to this, but acceptance to me almost sounds like I accept you to fit into something I'm expecting, or like I'm accepting that you will fit into this idea that I have. So respect almost feels like something that you can provide to somebody else and hold someone in respect, as opposed to accepting feels almost has some negative connotations of like, I accept the fact that you want to do this or whatever, but I'm not so happy about it. I don't know if I just said that. Maybe somebody has better words than that.
Joy, you're muted.
I don't know if this is better words or that it seems like there's two different ways that you were pointing out accept can work. One is this, yeah, okay, I'll deal with you. I think of that as more toleration, which is sort of the first, if you think of this as a spectrum, right over the midpoint of the xenophobic side, the rejection side, then you get toleration. Yeah, you're different, whatever. I'm just going to ignore that. It's not good, but I'll try to look the other way. Versus accepting people into something that exists already. And you're right that that's not the same as respecting people. And I was thinking about the way it works when like you get married and the new family accepts you, and indeed they want you to fit into their family. They don't actually want to change their whole family structure for you, and it's better to be accepted than not be accepted. But that doesn't mean that they want to welcome all the ways that you're different and an individual. And that seems to me to go more with the respect side. Like, we not only want you to fit into what we've got, we want to be enriched by what you're bringing. Is that on target?
Yes, thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. The next question that we had was from Michelle Lanky. Sorry if I did not say your name correctly. As an ally, I wish there was a way I could let trans folks that I see know that I see them, or / you, a code word or a gesture. Any thoughts?
I think if you're not trans and looking for some sort of gesture that will telegraph to trans people that you are aware of their needs and aware of their existence, using your pronouns, announcing your pronouns, is a very active gesture that, yeah, you know, you have to speak. It's not something that's like, it's not a subtle flag, but it helps normalize the use of pronouns and of pronouns in introduction. And it does signal pretty strongly that, that you're leaving space for other people to do that as well.
Thanks, River. I also want to add that that's a good thing to do with all people, whether you see them as see them and you think, oh, that's a trans person or not. You know, that's something that we do at Keshet with all of our meetings. So a good thing to do for trans folks and also for folks that you might not know their gender. Does anyone else want to add to this this question?
Maybe I'm speaking as the token old trans person here. So I don't know. Caden's being very careful to speak personally for himself, and I want to also say that. But the way that I grew up, I did not feel comfortable. And in a lot of ways, I'm not sure I'll ever really feel comfortable being seen by somebody else as trans when I haven't identified myself as trans. I'm not sure I'll ever feel safe enough. And I do know that there are times where I just kind of want to be there as me, and I don't want to be there as the visibly trans person. But I also know that it's like, oh, wait a second, did I not get dressed right? You're seeing me as trans. I didn't announce myself as trans. What did I do wrong? That is not anybody else's fault. These are my insecurities and vulnerabilities. But I think it's one of the complicated questions here, that it's sort of I don't know if there's an ideal way to be, because everybody is different, and also I'm different at different times of day. Sometimes it's like, oh, thank God somebody here is thinking about pronouns and stuff. That's cool. And sometimes I would feel like, oh crap, now I've been outed, or I did something, whatever, it's become an issue. And that would be my stuff. It wouldn't be about your stuff.
I really appreciate that you brought that into the conversation, Joy. I think the question that can drive those sorts of gestures is, who needs to be served by making a statement of allyship, solidarity, welcoming, and that to the extent that one can take on practices that create space for all people to be themselves and safe, it's wonderful. And the flip side is when the desire is to be able to say, I've identified someone as trans and want them to know that I'm their ally, that creates a situation that is individual rather than communal. It puts a spotlight on one person in a way that may not be welcome, rather than as a community, we make space for everyone to be themselves and not have to tell us about it if they don't feel like it.
That's great. Thank you, Joy and Rabbi Micah. We have one last anonymous question, and that is, what would you want to tell your younger self or young people currently? Feel free to answer however you wish. What would you want to tell your younger self coming to understand yourself as trans now?
I would tell myself to be patient and to know that things will evolve and they will change, and that's okay. And it's also okay to feel scared, and it's okay to feel disconnected and then connected and disconnected over and over. And to just remember that there are people out there that are like me and that support me, and to be patient that it will happen.
I think
Thanks,
I would
Debs.
have, sorry. I think for me, I probably would have told myself to listen to myself more. One of the questions I'm always asked when I do panels, or oftentimes I'm asked when I do panels, is like, when did you know that you were trans? And whenever I answer that, it's always like, I actually knew when I was really, really little, but then did the thing of like shoving it down and like telling myself that it wasn't happening. And I wish that I hadn't have done that. So I would have told my younger self to just listen to what I was feeling.
So you put your hand on your heart. That's such beautifully, both Dubs and Caden, those are such beautifully compassionate responses to your younger selves. I'm more irritated with my younger self, and so I'm going to try to learn from your compassion. But I think because I didn't fit into the binaries around me, I got stuck in very binary thinking as a kid. It had to be all or nothing, right or wrong. I was either fully myself or I wasn't myself at all. and that thinking persisted for so long, and it tortured me because, as I say, like binaries just they're not compatible with the full range of humanity. And I would really like to go back and say to my younger self, look, you're scared, this is complicated, it's overwhelming, so you want to make things simple, but frankly, these binaries are not your friend, and you don't need them to stay afloat. And even when you can't tell whether you're this or you're that, you're still there and you're still you.
Thank you, Joy. Does anyone else on the panel want to share? Go ahead, Debs.
I was just gonna close out. I want to be mindful of time. I know we started late, but that doesn't mean we get to end late. It's not the way it works. So I just want to say thank you to our panelists, Joy, Micah, Essie, River, and Caden, and to Zora and Emily for your help. And thank you to all of you for asking your questions and for being great listeners and smiling faces as I scrolled through the gallery. Thank you so much. For more information, more events, resources, visit keshetonline.org. Have a great day and happy Trans Day of Visibility, everyone. Take care.